The year is 1856, a year that would become a pivotal moment in American history, setting the stage for a series of events that would forever alter the nation's trajectory. America, a nation founded on ideals of liberty and justice, finds itself teetering on the brink of a catastrophic conflict. The land of the free is shackled by the chains of its own contradictions, as the promise of liberty is overshadowed by the grim reality of slavery. The issue of slavery, a festering wound since the nation's inception, has ripped open a chasm between North and South, threatening to tear the young republic asunder. Families are divided, communities are torn apart, and the very fabric of the nation is fraying at the seams. The moral and political battle over the future of slavery is reaching a boiling point, with passionate voices on both sides growing louder and more desperate. In this powder keg of tension, a shocking act of violence explodes in the heartland of Kansas Territory, the Pottawatomie Massacre. Kansas, a territory caught in the crossfire of pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces, becomes a battleground where the nation's ideological war turns bloody. The massacre is a stark reminder of how deeply the issue of slavery has permeated the American consciousness, igniting fierce and often violent confrontations. This brutal event, orchestrated by the radical abolitionist John Brown, would cast a long shadow over the coming Civil War, forever etching itself into the annals of American history as a chilling testament to the horrors of extremism and the devastating consequences of unchecked fanaticism. John Brown, a man driven by an unyielding belief in the abolition of slavery, takes the law into his own hands, believing that only through violent action can justice be achieved. His actions, while intended to strike a blow against the institution of slavery, instead ignite a firestorm of violence and retribution, setting the stage for the bloody conflict that would soon engulf the nation. The Pottawatomie Massacre is not just a moment of violence, it is a symbol of the deep divisions and the lengths to which individuals will go to fight for their beliefs. It serves as a grim precursor to the Civil War, highlighting the intense and often brutal struggle that lies ahead. The massacre leaves an indelible mark on the American psyche, a reminder of the cost of extremism and the perilous path the nation is on. As the nation hurtles towards civil war, the shadow of violence looms large. The events of 1856, and the Pottawatomie Massacre in particular, serve as a harbinger of the bloodshed and turmoil that will soon engulf the country. The struggle over slavery and the broader fight for the soul of the nation is far from over. The shadow of violence that falls over Kansas in 1856 is but the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards a more just and equitable America. Today, as we reflect on the events of the past, we are reminded of the sacrifices made and the lessons learned. The shadow of violence that once threatened to tear the nation apart has given way to a renewed commitment to liberty and justice for all. The legacy of 1856 and the Pottawatomie Massacre serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It is a testament to the enduring spirit of the American people and their unwavering dedication to the principles upon which the nation was founded. John Brown was no ordinary man. He was a figure who stood out in the annals of American history, not just for his actions, but for the fervor and intensity with which he pursued his beliefs. Born in 1800, Brown grew up in a deeply religious household, where the Bible was not just a book, but a way of life. This early exposure to religious teachings profoundly shaped his worldview and his sense of justice. A deeply religious man, he saw slavery as an abomination, a moral blight on the nation that could not be tolerated. To Brown, slavery was not just a social or economic issue, it was a sin against God that demanded immediate and uncompromising action. He believed that every human being was created in the image of God, and that enslaving another person was a direct affront to divine will, a sin against God that demanded retribution. Driven by an unwavering conviction in his own righteousness, Brown believed himself to be an instrument of God's will, chosen to deliver justice to the wicked and liberation to the oppressed. His sense of mission was so strong that he saw himself as a modern-day prophet, called to lead a crusade against the evil of slavery. This belief in his divine mission gave him a sense of purpose and a willingness to take extreme measures, chosen to deliver justice to the wicked and liberation to the oppressed. His fervent belief in the use of violence to achieve his goals set him apart from many in the abolitionist movement, who advocated for peaceful means of ending slavery. While many abolitionists believed in moral persuasion and political action, Brown was convinced that only through armed insurrection could the chains of slavery be broken. He saw violence not as a necessary evil, but as a righteous tool in the hands of the oppressed, who advocated for peaceful means of ending slavery. Brown's radicalism, however, found fertile ground in the violence-plagued landscape of Kansas Territory, where pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces clashed in a brutal prelude to the Civil War. Known as Bleeding Kansas, this period was marked by violent confrontations and guerrilla warfare, providing a grim backdrop for Brown's militant activities. He led raids and attacks, believing that his actions were justified by the higher moral law he followed. Where pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces clashed in a brutal prelude to the Civil War, Brown's actions in Kansas were a microcosm of the larger national conflict that was brewing. His willingness to use violence shocked many but also inspired others who shared his sense of urgency and moral clarity. Brown's legacy is a complex one, marked by both admiration and controversy, but his unwavering commitment to the cause of abolition remains a powerful testament to the lengths one man was willing to go to fight for justice. The Kansas Territory, dubbed Bleeding Kansas, was a microcosm of the national crisis. Pro-slavery settlers, many migrating from neighboring Missouri, sought to establish Kansas as a slave state. Opposing them were free staters, determined to prevent the expansion of slavery. Among these free staters was John Brown and his sons, who had answered the call to defend the cause of freedom in Kansas. On the other side of the divide stood pro-slavery settlers like the Doyles, a family targeted by Brown in his quest for vengeance. These men, caught in the crosshairs of Brown's zealotry, would become tragic pawns in a conflict spiraling beyond their control. The night of May 24, 1856 would forever be seared into the collective memory of Kansas Territory. It was a night that would mark the beginning of a violent and tumultuous period in American history, a night that would be remembered for its brutality and the deep scars it left on the land and its people. Fueled by rage and a thirst for revenge following the sacking of Lawrence, Kansas by pro-slavery forces, John Brown and a small band of followers descended upon the homes of pro-slavery settlers along Pottawatomie Creek. The sacking of Lawrence had been a devastating blow to the anti-slavery movement, and Brown, a fervent abolitionist, was determined to strike back with equal ferocity. His actions that night would ignite a firestorm of violence that would come to be known as Bleeding Kansas. Armed with swords and rifles, they dragged their victims from their homes, subjecting them to a brutal and merciless fate. The men, women, and children who lived along Pottawatomie Creek could scarcely have imagined the horror that awaited them as Brown and his followers moved from house to house, their weapons gleaming in the moonlight. The air was thick with tension and fear, and the cries of the victims echoed through the night, a haunting reminder of the violence that had taken hold of the territory. 5 men, James Doyle, his 2 sons William and Drury, Allen Wilkinson, and William Sherman, were hacked to death, their bodies left as a grim warning to those who dared to support the institution of slavery. The scene that greeted the dawn was one of unimaginable horror, with the lifeless bodies of the victims lying in the dirt, their blood staining the ground. The massacre at Pottawatomie Creek sent shockwaves through the nation, and the names of the victims would be etched into the annals of history as a testament to the brutality of the conflict. This bloody chapter in the history of Kansas Territory would serve as a stark reminder of the deep divisions that tore at the fabric of the nation, and the lengths to which individuals would go to defend their beliefs. The events of that night would be recounted in hushed tones around campfires and in the pages of history books, a chilling example of the human capacity for violence and the enduring struggle for justice and equality. The Pottawatomie Massacre sent shockwaves throughout Kansas and beyond. Pro-slavery newspapers seized upon the event, portraying Brown as a bloodthirsty madman and using the massacre to justify further violence against free staters. Retaliatory attacks and counterattacks escalated, plunging Kansas into a spiral of bloodshed and vengeance. The cycle of violence, once unleashed, proved difficult to contain, further deepening the divisions between North and South.